Functional testing is a generic term that refers to creating tests against a system's core features and functionality. Functional testing is a black box test type where mainly user and system functions are examined by entering input into a system component and examining its output. Unlike white box testing, the internal code logic, structure and operations are rarely considered in functional testing, and are not required to be known or understood by testers when executing functional testing. Using the black box analogy further, a user keying data into a web form on a screen and then subsequently checking the application's response after the data has been processed is a functional test. The user has access to the functional input mechanism, keyboard, more and application, and also to the system's response to that input, displayed on the monitor screen with some form of application response message. How the system internally processes that data is not necessarily known by the functional tester. In this sense, functional testing is applicable to testing a system's expected response to a condition that has been specified by a user or system requirement. Most requirement-based system designs ultimately require a suitable level of requirements coverage from a functional-based test effort. Note that functional testing is a commonly used but very generic and umbrella term in many other test types such as security, system, accessibility, exploratory, ad hoc and performance testing also may use a system's functions to achieve their objectives. The key difference is the core focus and objective of the test type. Functional testing always looks at and focuses on examining the core input and output behavior of the system as defined by its functional requirements. Non-functional testing is a grouping of other test types that have evolved over the years that doesn't fit nicely under the functional umbrella term. Non-functional testing has been a growing bucket and is now a collection of specialist test types necessary for an application deployment that are examined by people who are subject matter experts in those domains, and who are likely not your average users or functional testers. There are many test types included under this banner, with new ones being added all the time. The key thing to remember is that whilst both functional and non-functional testing examines how the system complies with stipulated system and user-defined requirements, non-functional requirements, NFRs, are also compiled to provide nominal parameters for the system to operate within. System behavior around NFRs is also further defined by industry requirements. For example, accessibility, security, localization and compliance testing are all influenced heavily by industry standards and governing bodies. Black box testing is a test type in which the inner workings and code structures of an application or system are not known to the tester. Instead, the system is a black box, where you can't see how the inner system works. A good example of a black box system is the computer. In general, people who buy and use computers have a very basic idea on how they work, but are more interested in what computers can do for them. Computers allow a user to install and run specific software applications, to browse the internet, to communicate with other people via emails and video conferencing, to play games, work or read and relax or send documents to a printer. These are all black box operations. Users are using input, via the keyboard, mouse or voice commands, to achieve some form of outcome executed by the computer. In all of the cases above, these operations were done without any knowledge or direct use of the internal workings of the computer. In white box testing, the tester focuses on testing how the system performs its tasks, and this requires an understanding of the inner workings of the system or application. Programming and system administration experience, extra tools, knowledge of the code-level design and application debugging techniques are all additional skills required for white box testers. White box testing also underpins the term system testing as well, which is one of the most widely but generic testing type terms used for many of the informative years from the 1970s through to early 2000, where the majority of behind-the-scenes system-level application functions are examined. These are not the same as user functions. This can include functions such as logging, database read/write functions, decision control trees, code statement testing, integration, SIT, and API calls, access, authentication and authorization, and as well as many others. Positive and negative testing are two test approaches or focus areas that can be utilized in a test effort. Both approaches enhance the level of test coverage of your application, making sure it behaves in a more stable and reliable manner. A positive test validates that a function does what it was designed to do, using valid input and checking output against what the functional design or requirement specified. These can also be called sunny day scenarios. A big difference between these two is in the test's expected results. Positive tests are expected to work. Negative tests are expected to produce an error. A negative test examines how the system responds when a user enters invalid data or interacts with the system in an unexpected way. These can also be called rainy day scenarios. A negative test that causes an error that the system cannot recover from will result in a defect. However, a test outcome where the system handles the error condition gracefully, by producing an error message to the user, for example, will result in the test passing. When planning a test effort, it's good practice to plan for both positive and negative tests. However, depending on the application's purpose, delivery time frame, and how important its functionality and overall robustness is, there should be a pragmatic balance between the two. As most users will do the right thing with respect to data entry, the execution and majority of positive tests should take precedence over negative testing.